Welcome to Microservices Explained. My name is Bartosz Jędrzejewski and I run the microservices-focused website e4developer.com. I decided to make a series of videos where I explain different microservices-related concepts and ideas, hence the title Microservices Explained. I thought I would start it by defining what microservices are. I'm talking about the definition of microservices, what they really are. It's good to look what the, I would say, most famous proponents of the terms have to say on the topic. So Martin Fowler and James Lewis wrote a very famous article on microservices, and James Lewis himself has blamed me for microservices in his Twitter tagline, as he's one of the first people who started using that term. You can see here that original article I was talking about. It's quite long, but it's, I would say, definitely worth reading if you have some more time. Martin and James go in quite a lot of details here describing microservices architectures. And while I don't think they give a precise definition of what these architectures really are, I mean, they talk about it, but they don't define it in like 2 or 3 sentences. They definitely talk about what sort of things characterize microservices, and this is what I'm going to talk a bit in the remaining of this video. So yes, definitely give a read to that if you have some spare 15-20 minutes. Oh, by the way, building microservices here, you can see that's a really good book on that topic if you're interested as well. So what characterizes microservices architectures? Again, I'm kind of basing that on this article. So first of all, the primary way of microservices system componentization is via services. That kind of reminds us of the service-oriented architectures where we try to decompose the system as multiple services. Rather than in monoliths, we would use some sort of components. In Java world, we'll have, say, war file with multiple jars. Here we're using services as the boundary. Another characteristic is that services are organized around business capabilities. That means we're more likely to see things such as account service, payment service, rather than database service or, security service. We want to think in terms of business capabilities here. That links to the product mindset. Sometimes software is delivered as projects, sometimes software is delivered as products, and microservices definitely suit better this product mindset where we try to deliver something, build a product that makes sense to you. Another characteristic is preference of smart endpoints and dumb pipes. So here we want the smarts to be in the services rather than in the pipes. We don't want really complicated enterprise service bus that you might have remembered from the SOA times. Then we move on to the centralized governance. So that's more freedom for developers. The services can differ from each other, and that's kind of one of the characteristics, is that freedom we gain. And the centralized data management, you might have heard that microservices should own their data rather than share database between each other. They cannot be truly decoupled if they share database, and you'll see later that mentioned in yet another definition that I'll come to. Automated infrastructure is also hugely important. The reason being here that suddenly you have so much more services to deal with, and if you have to manually be deploying everything and dealing with servers, you may very quickly be overwhelmed with what you have to deal with. We want to design for failure. That's also kind of coming back to the scale that you're dealing with here, if you don't design for failure and you're running 30 services, you will spend your whole all the time debugging and fighting failure. So just design for it. So yes, you need to make sure that you have some strategy in place. And evolutionary characteristics is something else that is often being talked about. So we want to have ability to change and evolve this architecture. We don't want to make it too rigid, so these services are nimble and easy to change. Again, if something is not clear here, I would really recommend you go back and read that article that I give you link here once again. It goes in a bit more depth. So that's what Martin Fowler and James Lewis have to say about microservices. Let's have a look now what Sam Newman has to say about microservices. He's the author of that book I mentioned earlier, Building Microservices. I think his talks definitely and that book are a great source of knowledge on that topic. And Sam actually gives you a definition for microservices. So let's look at that. Small autonomous services that work together, modeled around the business domain. And that's probably the best definition by far I've seen that encompasses what microservices really are. Sam also gave a very interesting topic called Principles of Microservices, where he explores again what characterizes microservices architectures. So this video is quite short. If you actually have a whole hour, you can watch that talk, and I think that's the best microservices talk that goes in depth, talking about what characterizes these architectures, and that's where I took that quote, that and his book Building Microservices. In these talks, the talk is titled Microservices, the Principles of Microservices. The actual principles mentioned are being modeled around business domain, culture of automation, hiding implementation details, decentralizing all the things, independent deployment, consumer first, isolating failure, and being highly observable. So what you can see here is that these principles are very much related to the characteristics from that original article. What that means is that there is the definition of microservices, but in reality, the microservices architecture, there is more to it than just a few words definition. It's a scale, how much you're fulfilling these ideal characteristics and how much true you are to the principles. I hope you enjoyed the video. It is based partially on the Microservices Definition article that I wrote for my blog, the e4developer.com. So if that interested you and you prefer to read it as well, feel free to visit my website and read it there. Share it with anyone who may be interested, and please give me feedback. What if you enjoyed the video, or what would you like to see done differently. Thank you once again for listening, and see you next time.